Hi there, this video is covering a feature that I think will help battle flow in Planetside 2. Battle flow in Planetside, when talking about fights between the empires, is typically based on lattice connections between bases and the language or logic of fighting that this produces. This topic will be explored at another time, but the point is that the issue of a base owner's side having indestructible spawns versus the soft spawns of attackers at a local lattice fight has a friction. This friction is in the form of base defenders having an immovable spawn point, while base attackers have destructible spawns, outside of a few niche cases such as 3-point amp stations. Now this is a problem for the game, as sustaining fights in Planetside is a core feature which doesn't have too many in-game mechanics in support of it in comparison to the player's agency and their willpower to sustain it. There is a high level of fatigue or frustration potential when you just want to have a fight happen somewhere and your spawn options to keep that fight alive are consistently denied due to the lack of options in protecting Sundies. While this might not seem like a big deal at the biggest of fights on the map, which quote-unquote naturally sustain themselves, it is still relevant even to those fights. Just because there are random Sunderers at a big fight doesn't mean they are protected or sustained when an opponent sets out to destroy them in the quickest fashion. And this applies even more so at mid and low tier populated fights, which are currently personified in the form of tank sniping at distance and light assault C4 rocklet comboing. I want to stress that when spawns are denied, fights die, and local lattice lane populations change dramatically from near equal to either one-sided or overpopulation or completely abandoned by all parties. This creates the fluctuations across the rest of the map, and negative chaos in my opinion occurs as this effect dominoes across other spaces until the waves of player redistribution settle because of reasons too long to get into for this topic. More methods for sustaining spawns are needed, and I have a concept which I think ticks a lot of boxes on achieving this, while still leaving these other features of tankers, light assaults, and all other weapon systems with their tools still in use. That concept is the Sundy bunker. The Sundy bunker is the concept of a hard-terrain shell that provides enough cover to a neutral space for any empire to deposit a Sunderer into and then acts as a dynamic spawn location. It provides that empire's players with a safe enough spawn to push from, but would also not act as too strong a projection of power. This would mean, for example, that the vehicle guns wouldn't be able to shoot out too much, and infantry wouldn't be able to nestle too far into the bunker, making it impossible to assault from other empires. It's important to note that there already exists a Sundy bunker concept in the form of the amp station tower asset. This design is already in use at amp stations, but it has factors such as jump pads which eliminate opponent travel time to its center, and its location relative to base ownership is a bit too close to cause messy fighting, rather than understandable. Another example would also be at the eastern tower of the Bastion. There's also a further example at Heyoka Tech Plant, in which is my inspiration in the form of a forward tower, just before the western bridge to Heyoka Chemical. This tower features something unique in it that is basically a hole in the ground for a Sunderer to nest in. This nesting feature is what the Sundy bunker mechanic is all about, and the core concept to achieve if this direct asset is not used. As Sunderers are Planetside current backbone to content in the form of fights and fight generation, from the positions on the map, ensuring there are strategic positions for such spawns to work from helps keep the game's battle flow active and interesting. Having Sunderers be protected enough to achieve this goal of fight generation has been an issue that over the years has seen specific features introduced, such as the deployment shield and stealth bubble, to help improve the survivability. The current issue with these mechanics is that they prove not enough in dealing with a multitude of potential threats to Sunderers, which these options do not help stop outside of a relative improvement over a stock Sunderer. These issues, from my perspective, continue to be line of sight on Sunderers and alpha damage. And while these two threats are not always expressed over general domination by opponents, they are consistent enough concerns at most fights on all continents that Sundies feel like they are just too fragile to disruption if the opponent, even as a solo or small group, wishes to remove them from the fight in a quick fashion. This original problem is due to how Sunderers often have poor positions to naturally set up at, while still trying to be relevant spawns for a fight to continue. Having hard shell bunker locations for Sunderers to occupy and deploy at help mitigate these issues of line of sight and alpha damage, since the actual spawn object is protected enough by a non-destructible environment to require opponents to take over the local area to secure the kill on the objective. These bunkers help battle flow in Planetside by providing sub-objectives for defending owners and attacking opponents vying for the bunker position to either neutralize it or occupy themselves, and this becomes an additional point of interest in exploring the map and seeing how players interact with each other. Player creativity and motivation in wanting to secure these spaces, either because of chasing fights where population exists, or lattice territory control logic demanding that these spaces be ally controlled, means that fights happen over them. And that is what we fundamentally want. We want interesting fights and keeping them going for an expected amount of time and with some level of predictability. I wouldn't suggest having these bunker locations too close to actual lattice bases as a conservative first approach. They would act as a connective tissue between lattice bases and be supportive positions which players can fall back on, while more exposed Sunderers act as primary spawns as they currently exist. So why does this impact battle flow so much? Because it provides hardy locations. Consider them as anchors for one empire to fall back on while another empire pushes the attack to it. They also keep the messiness of trying to balance weapon systems for a special item, the Sunderer, from crossing over into making other elements unfun or taking away options which enough players like to use, which is controversial to say the least. Players will also be willing to try and pull Sunderers more often if they think they will survive more than in the current conditions, and we will see the bunkers as their objective to get to. It also helps to improve the approach to combined arms play, as infantry and armor support each other in either defending or attacking these locations, and the wider interactions this generates with features, such as open field fights being a more organic experience rather than the rare experience they are currently. I would also add on that Sundy bunkers could act as a great rallying station for players as they see allies protecting that space when pushed out from bases, and which is an additional feature for helping new players see where to go, knowing that these bunker towers are points of interest to take or defend. Just imagine how fights could evolve between neighbour bases, which usually don't happen as the space between them is too great to cause player disconnection between these bases being relevant to each other. The reason why the Indar triangle of Crown, TI, Ceres occurs is because the bases are close enough and each hard enough to take that fighting occurs on their edges more often than inside of them as players run the distance or can visualize what to go towards. Imagine that with the right Sundy bunker placement to see fights occurring in so many more unique spaces. Finally, these assets already exist in the game too, so I do think it scales well with deployment and practicality for developers. It is not an issue of creating new code or assets which require far more time to test and see prove useful, while the Sundy bunker just needs to be tried in spaces on each map when they are updated. And with the recent 2020 content pushes by the developers, this window of opportunity is truly open now and not impossible to see if it works. Thanks for watching.